Hi everyone, it's Eli. You know how sometimes you stumble upon something truly game-changing in healthcare? Well, I found it. KinetiSense. This cutting-edge motion capture technology is transforming movement, assessment, and recovery. Imagine getting instant AI-driven insights without any wearables on your patient. That's right, no ping pong balls needed. Just pure, accurate data. Perfect for boosting athletic performance, pinpointing imbalances, and refining rehab. Top professionals worldwide trust KinetiSense to maximize productivity and results. Check out our partner page to learn more. Experience the revolution in movement. Welcome to Wrap It Up Sports Medicine and More, the podcast that gives you a viewpoint in sports medicine that can't be found anywhere else. I'm your host, Eli Hallak, and we have a fantastic show ahead of us today. So, let's get started. Welcome to Wrap It Up Sports Medicine and More. Today, I'm your host, Eli Hallak, and we've got a couple guests for us today. One is our official guest, who we'll get to in a second, but we'd like to welcome back Joel Doerning, assistant head athletic trainer at St. Francis High School. Good morning, Joel. How are you doing, buddy?
Good morning. Pleasure to be back.
Always fun to have you here. Today, our guest, and this is why I brought in Joel, because he loves this topic. Guest today, Dr. Douglas Kalman, who is clinical associate professor in the Osteopathic Medical School at Southeastern Nova University. How are you doing today, sir?
I am doing well, and it's Nova Southeastern University.
My apologies.
It's okay. Maybe it could be a word scramble because I'm sure Southeastern's in more than one university title somewhere, or many wheres, Nova and so forth. But it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
I know we've been trying to get you on the show for nearly a year, so excited to have you here. Really, this topic is, well, to us as secondary school athletic trainers, is super important because, you know, the student athletes at this level just don't take it as serious as they do at the collegiate or even the pro level. So I appreciate you coming in and sharing your knowledge about this topic today.
Well, thank you. I would say one of the things that differentiates a high school athlete versus a collegiate, besides obvious age, and is the atmosphere. So in high school, you're there with your friends, you're there with your frenemies, you're there with other people, right? There's some type of social atmosphere. You've grown up to some degree with them, depending upon where you reside. It could be elementary school, middle school, high school, right? Or some semblance thereof. And then when you go to a university, you have people that may come in from all over, and your kind of students are starting new, and they know that they're there. Let's say if they're there for an athletic scholarship year, they're there for school too, but they know that they have to excel because now the swimming pool is a lot different than the one that's in high school. What was it? I had a wrestling coach that used to say something about, would you be do you want to be a big fish in a small pond or a big fish in a big pond? You know, and he said some people are just going to be small fish in a big pond as
So
well.
true. So true. I actually use that quote quite often. I love that one.
Coach Henke, great wrestling coach from Long Island, Farmingdale, New York.
Got to know your nutrition when you deal with real wrestling athletes. So I know Joel can attest to that one.
Well,
Yeah.
wrestling is one of the sports, and I'll welcome some comments, of course, from Joel. But wrestling is one of the sports where there is a higher incidence of eating disorders and disordered eating as compared to other team-based sports. Weight-based sports, are the ones that automatically have a greater risk category. So, wrestling is one of them. And that's probably any age, there's a risk of that. Where it's different for gymnasts or cheerleaders or ballet dancers, the pressures on them are different. And it's not an officially a weight-based sport, but those things become weight-based, designed by
So
coaching.
the perception of how they look and all that too.
Now,
I remember, I'm sorry, I remember working with one athlete, not high school, but collegiate tennis player, that the coach just didn't like their weight. So these things happen. People have biases. They thought that they would be cover more ground and play better if they were 5, 10 pounds, lighter, 15 to 20 lighter. And, realistically, that wasn't the case, and that's not always the case. So sometimes you're also dealing with coaches and other people that have biases that come in to play that can impact an athlete. Same thing for a high school athlete in a weight-based sport or not a weight-based sport. You know, comments by coaches and teachers that the students respect often can have a greater impact than one would think. We might think it's a flippant comment, and for them, it could be the comment that changed their day.
Right. Then you start looking at a mentality aspect too that it affects how they play.
Right, right. And when it comes, I think there's a lot of educational opportunity still in wrestling with how to how to choose what weight classes would be best for you. And then along with that, if you're going throughout the wrestling season, understanding how to maintain weight rather than having to cut weight to make the weight, for weigh-in day. So understanding how to eat during the training week, if most of your competitions or tournaments are Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe one match during the week, how to eat to maintain so you're not coming in on a end of a week and you gotta. I, I remember one person cutting like 12 pounds in high school, which is crazy. Um, and the stories for how they do it are even crazier,
Right. They
you
get so
know.
maintained on trying to hit that number that they don't actually fuel the body for the actual competition.
Right, and some people will say, "Oh, I just won't eat for the week." No, that's not going to work for your education. That's not going to work for your mood. That's not going to work for healthy weight loss. That's not going to work for many different reasons, right? So, I think there's opportunities in high school sports, in every sport, to educate about how to that when you look at nutrition, you can look at it as fuel. And so it's fueling for a purpose. And it's understanding how to fuel for that purpose, which can differ depending upon the sport of the athlete. Right? There's going to be a difference if you have a cross country runner versus a shot putter. All right, you're going to have a difference in between a football lineman, even and a wide receiver.
On positions.
Right, and look at how much different positions mean different energy demands and energy put that's getting put out in practice and game. So with relatively speaking, we have to understand some might need more carbohydrates, some maybe a little bit less. Some people need to make sure they're getting adequate protein, or if they're a vegan or vegetarian, more than adequate protein. And then not to think that healthy fats are, French fries that are not oily when you grab them, but how to understand how to eat, how to understand, each of the macronutrients, carbs, proteins, fats, even if at a basic level, for what is healthier and what is less healthy, and what is fueling for sport versus what is eating for pleasure.
well, and with the end of the year coming up and the holidays, fueling for pleasure is something well known right about now.
Well,
So,
the typical weight gain, and maybe it's changed, but typical weight gain, they say from Thanksgiving to New Year's Day is about 15 pounds.
Oh wow.
Not a high school kid, but
holy moly,
adults,
I
right?
don't need 15 more. I'm good, man. I can't
Well,
afford that.
that doesn't mean all of us are not average here. We're somewhere slightly below that.
My
And
wife would agree with that. I'll tell you right there right now.
um, with that being said, and I may differ from your wife, in that is, we have to understand that, your choices matter, right? You can go to a social party if it doesn't mean that you need to have a taste of every dip, right? So choices matter, even little choices, your fluids throughout the day. If you're somebody that is not necessarily weight conscious or macronutrient conscious or doesn't have to be, right? Because you maintain pretty healthy weight all the time, then or even if not, if you're looking to for weight management, understanding the calorie differences even in the beverages, like Oh, I'm healthy. I drank 6 Gatorades today. Okay, did you run 22 miles? Why? And I only use that name as a public example, not
Of,
picking on them.
of
Don't
course.
want to don't want to be sued by them.
Of course.
Um, because sport drinks and carbohydrate electrolyte solutions have their role in sport nutrition. They have their role in hydration and rehydration. Well, where they generally don't have a role is the person that wants to, and I could age myself, be like Mike, right? But at the same time, never gets off the couch or does relatively little physical activity. So it's matching carbohydrate need and simple carbohydrates versus complex also to, your metabolic demands, the demands of your sport, of your training. So for example, I don't know if your high school has a swim team. I live in Florida, so they all have swim teams. And it's pretty common that they're going to train twice per day. Usually 5:30 in the morning before school, they have a swimming workout. And somewhere early after school, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, they have a strength and conditioning, twice a week or so. And then on their own, they always do something, or they're also members of a club swim team and they'll coach and getting in double the training. So it's also meeting with each different coach, if you can, and talking with the different teams and educating about general nutrition for health and then nutrition for performance. So let me ask the both of you a question. If you could rate yourselves, are you people that individually think about when you think about food and what you're going to eat or make or next? Is it driven by pleasure or is it the taste doesn't matter? I'm eating because I have to.
I kind of fall in the middle. I think it's a little bit of, I want to make sure I'm eating foods I like, but I'm also very mindful of, what those choices lead to. So I think that's, like you said, choices. It's, you make sacrifices at certain points of the day saying, I'm going to be good, or I can have sweets one day, but you just have to regulate and make sure that it's all about consistency.
Well, consistency definitely is the key. Consistency in training, right? You know, we have a saying in boxing. It's a sport very involved with for the last however many years, 15, 20 years. That how you spar or how you train and how you spar is going to be how you fight. Same thing there's very rare few that can be terrible in the wrestling room, but you put them on the mat in a match, and suddenly they're the next Dan Gable, or they're Olympic. They're Gable Stevenson, right? To be more still the Gable name, awesome, named after Dan Gable, actually. So with that being said, or I made that up, one of the two.
It's good either way.
Yeah. Well, that being said, I think that we have a lot of opportunities when you're an educator, when you're a coach, when you're an athletic trainer, when you are a strength coach, when you're a registered dietitian, to help with early education. And without sounding hopefully wrong, a good part of basic nutrition education starts in the household or is part learned from the household. Kids, if you think about them, younger kids, and then as they get a little bit older, they mimic to some degree what they see. So what they see, if you have a family that, nobody cooks at the house and you tend to bring in a lot and eat out a lot, well, they're not going to really learn anything because they're experiencing chilies or whatever. A lot of it starts in the home with just even what kind of food does the family eat? Does the family cook? How does the family cook? What are the influences, if it's an intact family, of the mother and the father, and even if it's a divorced home, of either one of those, right? For what they do in the house. Do they involve the children? Do they themselves eat relatively healthy? Um, are they of, if possible, are they also of healthy body weight, right? Things like all of these things influence the kids that you coach and teach.
Or even
And
their
then when they
family
get to, and
culture.
then when they get to college, the is also another opportunity because if they're most universities have a registered dietitian in the athletics department that is available or assigned. You may have more than one, but you might have one that's assigned to your team. I know at one time I had 17 teams that I oversaw, but only
Oh
four
my.
coaches.
Oh my.
Yeah, so that just meant 17 general lectures to everybody to satisfy NCAA requirements in the beginning of the season or in August. And then those coaches that actually, or either those coaches that were more interested in the sport nutrition for performance, with they throughout the seasons, worked with them. And then athletic trainers or direct coaches would sometimes refer an athlete from their team. That's one of the reasons, and one of the things I learned was best to have a great rapport with the athletic training department, because more often than not, injured athletes and other athletes that are working with ATCs and working with, rehab, prehab, and all of that, often are talking to the athletic trainers, and they may talk more or more freely with you than they would with the coach. So sharing of information, that what is allowed, is often helpful when you think about the individual's care and then positive influence for the team.
Becomes a true team effort to sometimes, help those athletes out.
So here's a question I have for you, Eli.
Of course.
What kind, what's the major job of any of us, let's say, during an athlete's competitive season?
Help them stay healthy and safe.
Yes, yes.
I
You
got an
know,
A. Woohoo! Mark
well,
the day on the calendar.
there's
That's
so
the
many people that don't understand that. Like, no, my main job is to keep you healthy. Your job as an athlete is to do X, Y, and Z. Apply what you're learning, eat to, if you're not eating to recover, your next training session is going to falter, as potentially would be the competition. So understanding eating for recovery, understanding eating for fueling and refueling, understanding hydration, uh, not buying into all the marketing you hear and see and watch, I guess, on TikTok and whatever other social media channels
Ugh, ugh,
people are on.
ugh.
There's too much misinformation. Um, and there's a lot of good information, but sometimes it's hard for people to decipher, right? Especially younger, because how it's packaged makes a difference. You know, you can have somebody saying really good information, but if they're boring and they don't have things flashing or whatever, they're not, and they can't do it in 20 seconds,
And
like,
they don't have the followers.
well,
Gotta
yeah,
have
well,
followers, yeah.
yeah, yeah, that part matters too, but everybody starts somewhere unless you pay for followers, I guess. I don't know how that works. Don't
Ditto.
want to know. Don't want to know. But I think it's important. You have a podcast going here, so there's many different ways people can learn about all the important topics that you guys discuss, and whether and whatever platforms you upload it to, you know. So I think the opportunity. Um, I know from past podcasts I've been on, uh, is some people have the bandwidth and the support, that have somebody that knows how to splice things up into little snippets and send them out as reels and other things. I only know language. I don't know how to do any of that.
That would be our producer, Gabriel Hallak. Thank you very much, sir. That is
Well,
well beyond my understanding. I got to ask you one question because you're so passionate about what you do. And if, as I was going through reading a little bit about you, how the heck did you get so involved in nutrition? What was the igniting factor for you?
I would say igniting factor was when I was a teenager. I was an athlete, still consider myself one, but whatever. I haven't made reconciliation in between body age and what my brain thinks I could do.
I hear you on
Uh,
that one. Yep.
um, but going back to, I first got interested in general nutrition and nutrition because of reading magazines as a teenager, like Muscle and Fitness, right? And for the crowd out there, there used to be a print thing that people would read. You would go to a newsstand and you would pay for it, or you would have a subscription and hope the post office person didn't take it. So workout magazines, working out with friends, junior high school, actually at the end of elementary school, sixth grade, going into junior high school, going into weightlifting, all of that, being a wrestler. And then what actually triggered much more interest for me is I started reading about diets and reading about correlation, maybe causation in between the diets and colon cancer and diets and heart disease. And so at the time, I changed my own diet around and started reading more medical literature, and decided, all right, this is what I'm going to major in college. Actually, I started out. I had two other ideas for majors before I switched into nutrition officially. I started out social work because I like helping people. And then, wrongly, I'm going to say this. Then I thought to myself, after a couple of courses, which I really enjoyed. Hearing people's problems all day might be depressing or might, lead to a flippant comment to somebody that's depressed that ends in something bad. So
Got to
maybe
know your
not.
limitations, right?
Right.
Definitely, definitely.
And then where I was going to college at that time was Queens College. And there was a gentleman named there, Bill McCardle, who's famous in physiology. Also at the time, Queens College offered an athletic training program. So I started out in the athletic training program. And then I transferred ultimately a couple semesters later into nutrition and ended up going from there. Ultimately, I ended up finishing an undergraduate at Florida State University. But going back to the passion really was, why is it that we get diseases from foods that we eat and don't eat? And at the same time, we can use foods to recover from a lot of these diseases. So that existential question really was what drove me into field of nutrition.
And that's something so simple to think about, but how many people at the high school, junior high level even think that way? That's a hell of a passion you got there at such a
I
young
also
age.
I also had some benefit besides, of course, going to library, the public library, and probably having a North Belmore library card and going there and getting whatever. My sister worked in publishing, so she would go to her New York City bigwig company that she worked for in publishing, and she would bring me home books that were coming out that were related to either health, fitness, diet, disease, and I would keep the ones that I was interested in and read them. Then I also had a cousin at that time that's a cardiologist, and as he was going through his, I think, fellowship, he would mail me sometimes even articles from New England Journal of Medicine just to read, and then say, "Hey, call me," so he can explain it to me and other things like that. So it's a little atypical, but it fueled my passion because they would send me things and I would ask questions. And I remember being really interested, just reading, like being in a car ride with my parents going to grandma's house, and so hour drive kind of thing, and reading like the medical dictionary and being fascinated. Now I know all these terms. Okay, what's next? Kind of thing.
Love it. Atypical, definitely, but it fuels the fire and gets you going.
Yes, and to fuel a fire, we need carbohydrates mostly. We need adequate and appropriate protein and healthy fats.
Glad
And
I
of
was
course,
able to intro that right for you.
and of course, what's interesting? If I ask you about your health and nutrition, what do you think about? If I ask, hey, how's your health? How's your nutrition? What's your diet like? And I'm not asking you to personally describe your diet. I'm just asking you, what do you think about?
Well, right now, I'm in a weird time in life. Health is the top of my priority for the first time ever. I got a very odd diagnosis this summer that I'm now currently fighting. So for me, diet is extremely important, trying to find a nice balance with the medication I'm on, not gaining too much weight, which, yeah, that threw that out the window. Trying to find the balance between what makes me feel healthy and alert and oriented and somewhat active, trying to be active or more active as I'm feeling better. Yeah, it's been a trip to the last 6 months for me physically.
For
Joel?
me, it's more, I mean, I think lifestyle. I went through a stage in my life, 7, 8 years ago where I dropped about 35 pounds. And then for me, it
Congratulations.
was about how do I be consistent and how do I change my lifestyle to be where I'm at? And I think, and then I always tell people it's about goals. And my goals, I got 2 young kids who I coach baseball and I'm active with them, and I have to be present at work. And I know that I've got athletes that rely on me to be able to, you know, take care of them as well. So it's how do I take care of athletes if I can't take care of myself?
Two great answers. So, one, Joel, I'm going to come right back to you on this. You said diary, and there's right. You mentioned the word diary. Like, how do you stay consistency?
Right.
And so there's this Olympic gold medalist wrestler named Ben Askren, Askren. He also he's a retired UFC fighter, and recently he had a, a double lung transplant, right? And he's back to training. He puts up his inspirational videos all the time. He's got a wrestling club. And he's very, very well known. And the reason I bring him up is that he created a journal that's called the All In Journal, and he markets it to wrestlers, but it's for anybody. And in the journal, there's specific things that the athletes are supposed to deal with and write on a daily basis, which is goal setting. And it's great because it's a already created tool. It says wrestlers, doesn't matter. Maybe you have a local office create one of your own, but something like this that the athletes have daily goals, and and weekly, monthly, daily, whatever it might be. But this one is very popular, and it has, like I said, a large following. There's a section where the athlete or the person is supposed to write what they have gratitude for, what their today's action is, which would be your goal setting. Then another part where they're supposed to reflect about the positives and the opportunities and what their vision is. And then another section where they could journal.
I
And you
love
do that
that.
for every day.
I love that.
Yeah. So um, I know that for me, I don't know if I'd be disciplined enough as a high school athlete to do that, but I would love to offer the tool because I remember I was disciplined enough to keep like a diary of my training logs and when I would change up routines and what they were in high school.
Okay.
Right. So everybody's there. I wanted to share that. And then I also wanted to share a few different things in reflection to what both of you said. So Joel, you also made it changed for weight management and health and family and longevity and all of these kind of things, which are admirable. So you had your own aha moment, and whatever you did lifestyle wise, which I would imagine if you're not necessarily changing the types of foods, it's definitely changing portion sizes, right?
Right.
And then, of course, you must have gotten some type of more physical activity in,
Right.
and it all adds up. So, like the person that sits at the desk but is tapping their toe all day long, right? That non-purpose, it's called non-purposeful physical activity. That person that does that burns extra calories, right? So all those little things add up. If you're uh, ice cold water burns a little bit more energy to be swallowed, absorbed, digested, metabolized, and excreted than room temperature water.
Thank you for saying that because my students don't believe it every time I tell them that.
No, there was a great paper, I think it was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, looking at the thermogenic effect, if you will, which means the amount of heat that's put off or calories that are expended. And in this instance, one thing that you could say to your students, and I say this to some of my college students, when we talk about miracles of the body, if you think about, you take a hot cup of coffee, which we know from lawsuits from Starbucks and McDonald's can be 160 to 210 degrees, right? You take a sip of it. Why doesn't it burn your throat? Question. Then at the same time, or maybe not literally at the same time, a different time, you go get yourself a scoop of real ice cream or something frozen or ices. How come it doesn't freeze your esophagus after you swallow? The body spends energy either bringing blood to the area to dissipate the heat, the coffee, or bringing blood to the area to concentrate for a little bit to bring it, the ice cream, everything. So by the time it's traveling through the esophagus and gets to your stomach, it's at what? Body temperature. So it takes energy, more energy to do it for an ice cold liquid as compared to a hot liquid for some reason. But it's just fact, what data shows us to date. So I don't know if that's helpful, Eli,
I
for your
might have to drink
students.
more iced coffee then, Joel. What do you think?
Well, if it's a frappuccino, you're going to defeat your purpose,
No, no, no. Never,
right?
okay. No, no.
I don't know if that counts as coffee.
Yeah. Elevate your knowledge, ignite your curiosity, and compete with the best minds at events hosted by the American Academic Competition Institute. AACI's sports medicine competitions feature practical exercises, challenging quizzes, specialty tests, and keynote speakers that foster knowledge and social engagement in healthcare and sports medicine. Go to aacitest.org for more information on upcoming regional and national competitions. Sign up for the ultimate intellectual showdown.
And then one thing I wanted to say to you, Eli, is if you have a medical motivation for the reason that you change your diet, And anybody has a medical motivation to want to learn more about how can diet impact whatever, if there's a diagnosis or a condition, a rule in or rule out, whether it's personal feeling, like you didn't see a doctor yet, but you're not feeling yourself, or you have seen one, look for your local registered dietitian. That's somebody that is degreed, and that's somebody that's board certified in nutrition, including what's called medical nutrition therapy, which is nutrition that goes along with disease or conditions. One of the classes I teach in Nova Southeastern University's medical school, the osteopathic. We actually have two medical schools, an allopathic, so traditional MD, and an osteopathic, a DO. We have two separate medical schools. Going into that, when you're talking about these things, is the importance of understanding what a registered dietitian can offer. So I know that you can go to, I think it's eatright.org, which is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, to find a registered dietitian. And through the academy of like 100,000 dietitians, one in your neighborhood could come up. And that's for anybody. The other thing that I wanted to mention is we often, when we ask about diet, the person reflectively thinks about, but not necessarily the beverages they drink. And I want to really kind of underscore, emphasize, whatever the right word is, the importance of fluids.
Hammer it home. That's what I would say. Hammer it home, because as I've learned over the years, not just in the last 6 months, hydration, so important, and proper hydration is so important.
Yes, proper hydration is very important. On a picture level, the darker your urine, the more dehydrated you are. The lighter your urine or more faint it is, the more hydrated you are. Now, I'm going to throw a loop in that. Let's say Joel is like, damn, I'm good. I had oven fried falafel and broccoli for lunch, right? Making an example of something semi healthy, right? I don't know how you would do that in a school. But so you're having that food. Food, depending upon the food does have fluid in it, right? Fruits and vegetables are the foods that have the most fluids in it. So they count towards your hydration needs. Now, let's say Joel, after having that meal, decided, I'm going to be proactive on my health and I'm going to take this multivitamin, right? So he takes a multivitamin or a B vitamin, and I'll be specific in a second. And then he goes to the bathroom for, over the next couple of hours, next 2 hours, he goes and urinates 1, 2 times. And his urine is glow in the dark yellow.
Fluorescent.
Right? So that is not dehydration. That is actually an after effect, if you will, or the metabolic effect, digestive and physiology effect and metabolism of the B vitamin riboflavin. So riboflavin under light, optically, rotates light and comes up that yellow, even if you looked at it under a microscope. So that would not be a point where you're dehydrated. So understanding timing of when you look at your urine in general to say, am I hydrated? And something I will add is it is a myth that we're supposed to get 8 glasses of 8 ounces or 64 ounces of fluid per day. That is a myth. However, there are recommendations for fluids. Men are recommended to get at least 3.7 liters of fluids per day, and women at least 3 liters of fluid per day. That's by the Institute of Medicine. And they are the agency or organization that helps the FDA the USDA make dietary recommendations related to our recommended daily needs. Now, when you think about that level, a few things hopefully cross your mind. That includes any fluid that might be in food, but most people don't eat 5 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, so they have a low water content from their food. So that means fluids that we're supposed to get from the diet. Of course, we have caloric fluids, juices, sodas, sugared iced teas.
Not good, not good.
Right,
Stay away from those.
Slurpees,
Slurpees, oh
frappuccinos.
my God, I remember those.
Right. Now,
That's going back a while.
if I'm thinking like a high school person, I know I see them at Starbucks getting all the dessert drinks.
Oh, yes.
Same thing, Dunkin' Donuts, all of those places, right? So those are adding calories without really much hydration.
If anything, dehydrating, depending on the
Well,
content,
no,
correct?
no, actually, it is a myth, meaning not true, that caffeine induces diuresis or dehydration. So that part's a myth.
That's good to hear on my part. So thank you.
The only item that we drink as a beverage that actually can induce dehydration is alcohol. Alcohol metabolically inhibits an enzyme that's called, well, it affects alcohol dehydrogenase, which is an enzyme that metabolizes alcohol, and affects antidiuretic hormone, which is the hormone that regulates whether you got to go urinate or not. You know, the filling of your bladder and then whether you got to go urinate or not. So the only thing that does that people drink and no high schooler should, right, would be alcohol. So every other beverage counts towards your hydration. But for nutrition, healthy nutrition, beverages that are based on monosaccharides and disaccharides, simpler sugars, are not adding to nutrition. They're giving empty calories. They're not giving vitamins, minerals, fiber, phytonutrients, you know, things that you would get, let's say, if you ate a handful of blueberries, or even if you made yourself a blueberry, strawberry, banana smoothie, right? But my point being is that we have to understand calorie fluids versus low calorie, non calorie fluids also, because they all impact your body weight. Now, here's another something that you could share with your athletes. This is different amongst the genders, female and male. So, for a female, there's been some really, and man, there's been really some elaborate studies led by the athletic trainer Douglas Casa, CASA, up at University of Connecticut, UConn Stores, over the years, looking at, along with other people, but looking at how hydration levels impact cognitive function and physical performance. And one thing that is seen in women is that when a female gets to just 1.4 to 1.6% loss of fluids, they're not yet dehydrated. That would be hypohydrated, meaning underhydrated. That there starts to be a negative impact on cognitive function. Let's give an athletic scenario. Cognitive function. We're playing the game soccer. You're a defender. It's now the 60th minute of a 90-minute game. You really, in the 24 to 36 hours leading up to the match, you haven't really hyperhydrated, got enough fluids in. And now so you came in maybe underhydrated. And now during whatever water breaks and otherwise, you know, you're too busy listening to coach to fully hydrate with, you know, Gatorade, water, whatever it might be. So now you're underhydrated through all the sweat loss, which then negatively impacts cognitive function, which now as a defender means maybe you're not reading the play that's coming towards you and you're not communicating to the goalie or your other defenders and teammates where to move. So defensively, you could counteract the play that you see coming your way. And you just cost your team a goal. So how an individual nutrition, just on hydration, can then affect a team.
Right.
For men, that rule of thumb number is 2% body weight loss. So if you're 100 pounds before practice and now you're 98 pounds after practice, you lost 2% of your body weight. What we have our athletes do, even in high school, is realistically as possible is weigh themselves before and after, because that tells you approximately how much water weight you lost, right? And the rule of thumb is that you need 20 ounces of fluid for every 1 pound of body weight lost in order to rehydrate. So now if you just lost 3 pounds of body weight during practice and you weighed yourself in before practice, let's say in essential clothing only, so not your essential clothing only. Then after practice, again, not in sweat covered, heavier material, just essential clothing only. And you see your body weight loss, that tells you a good approximation of just how much fluids you just lost. And the rule of thumb again is 20 ounces per pound loss. So somebody losing 3 pounds has to rehydrate over the next couple of hours with at least 60 ounces of fluid to catch herself or himself back up.
And then they have to do that every single day because after a week of practicing games, that all adds up even
Yeah,
more.
it's on a daily basis. It's on a, and then what you do the day before, you know, also leads into the next day, diet wise, you know. So you have to make sure you're having adequate carbohydrate, adequate protein. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian, that means that you actually need about 1.5 times the amount of protein as a meat eater. And that has a lot to do with that vegan and vegetarian sources of protein, including these fake meats, if you will, right? Just to name one, like Impossible Burger and those type, not picking on anybody.
Of course.
Research even just published last week in a top tier physiology journal that actually studied a group of people on that kind of fake meat protein versus equivalent people eating beef and had them resistance train, which is fancy name for weight train, and acutely looked at the impact on muscle protein synthesis, which is something that we could look at cellular wise, and then also looked at the changes in body composition, which we can measure on some semi-sophisticated devices like a dual X-ray absorptometry or a DEXA or a BIA device, and a few others, BOD-POD. But nonetheless, those on the fake meat needed 1.5 times the amount of protein to get the same response. And other studies have shown the same thing with other vegetarian, vegan sources of protein. So athletes that choose that lifestyle need to know and understand and be educated on what are vegetarian sources of protein and then how to figure out how much you need. If you need 1.5 times as a meat eater, well, what 1.5 times of what, right? So the rule of thumb, without having anybody to do hard math, on a minimal level, is looking at 0.6 grams of protein per pound of body weight on the minimal. Now, we all know that we don't like to be minimalists. So athletes might overshoot that, and that's okay. We like them to overshoot that. If I'm telling you the minimum is 0.6 grams per pound of body weight, then if somebody's getting more, that's fine, right? Where now that vegan or vegetarian would be shooting for 1.2 grams or 1.5. So it would be 0.9 grams per pound rather for that vegan or vegetarian. Easy
And,
to round up just
and
to
either
1
way,
gram per
going
pound.
over is a little bit better. You rather be over than under on those calories.
Yeah, on the protein calories, not all calories. If you're consistently over on all your calories, then you end
Then
up
you're in trouble.
eventually you end up in trouble. Just talking about carbohydrates and proteins. One of the things are when we look at the guidelines from the Institutes of Medicine, not talking sport yet, but in general, it says the acceptable macronutrient daily ratio of carbohydrates. So the recommended ratio of carbohydrates is 45 to 65% of the diet. Most of those carbohydrates should be what's known as the complex kind. Science and the American Heart Association and others say that we should get no more than 50 grams of added sugars per day. So if you look at a food label, on a food label, it will tell you total carbohydrate. And now under law, it has to tell you added sugars. And that will tell you how many grams of sugar did the manufacturer add to that food that were not originally in there in order to make that finished food that you're getting. And we're supposed to not get more than 50 grams of added sugars because over time, they add up to empty calories and have a negative effect on metabolic health. So reading a food label is also one way to help on that.
And actually, as a consumer, many people will be extremely surprised at how high that sugar content is.
Yes. So let's say, for example, and I'm only using this name because it's popular, you get something like one of those 20-ounce bottles of Coca-Cola. They're alone going to have more than 50 grams of sugar in it. That's your whole day's allotment. And let's say that you're a soda drinker. So you have one at lunch, one because you're getting tired at 3:30 in the afternoon, you think it's going to pick you up, and then one with dinner. So now you've just ingested 750 empty calories or more, and lots of sugar. 150 grams of sugar.
Not good for the body. Not good. And plus all the
Carbohydrate,
hate to
uh,
say all the other additives in those sometimes.
right. So, but for your audience, we're looking for a carbohydrate range of 45 to 65%. Athletes need more towards the higher end. Those people that are less physically active need towards the lower end. So if you're a person that doesn't really do much physical activity, 45% or so of your calories from carbohydrate is appropriate. If you're an athlete, 65, even 70% can be appropriate. Protein needs, according again to the AMTR, we're looking at a range of 10 to 30% of calories. So generally, for athletes, we're pushing them in the 20 to 30% calorie range. And finally, for fat, percentage of calories should be 30% or less, with as best as possible trying to divvy up those kind of fats into no more than 10% saturated, and the rest mostly coming from 10% polyunsats and 10% monounsats. So, which is hard to do. Easiest thing to remember is saturated fats are fats that are solid at room temperature. Best example would be butter. You lift it out all day, it might get a little bit soft, but it doesn't melt, right? That's a saturated fat. Food wise, a good example of a saturated fat is steak that is marbled. So the white parts of steak or meat that you see is fat.
Oh,
Now,
don't ruin that for me. I know a good ribeye when I see it.
right, but it's all about appropriate serving size and how often for that. Because research also shows that those people that have a higher intake of saturated fat, lifetime wise, develop various metabolic and neurologic disorders to a greater risk degree than others. So, high saturated fats are associated with glucose intolerance over a lifetime, and also associated with greater risk of Alzheimer's, which, uh, so what you do now and then what you do throughout your life all impacts what happens later. For an athlete, again, it's about eating for recovery, eating for performance, and eating to stay healthy.
Yeah,
Those are the things
purpose
that I
behind
try
it.
to drive home.
There's got to be a purpose behind what you're doing. I mean, the athletes are mindful in their stretching, they're mindful in the weight room, but they always forget there's got to be a purpose behind the fuel you put in your body too.
And I would add that for athletes, especially high school athletes that are utilizing social media, if you're looking to learn what some of the better websites, or I'm sorry, first, before we go to social media, for coaches, athletic trainers, the International Society of Sports Nutrition has published a plethora of position stands. And these ISSN position stands are used by coaches globally to help put together the nutrition, education, strategy, communications, with and for their athletes. So I'm going to share with you in the chat a link directly to the PubMed, the National Library of Medicine Indexed Journal. It's a Journal of International Society of Sport Nutrition. Uh, the link that goes right to the position stands. And in that article collection, you can see that there's a position stand on weight cut strategies for like mixed martial artists and other combat sports. Wrestling's considered a combat sport.
Looking at it right now, yes.
There's a position stand on understanding omega-3 fatty acids, popularly called fish oils. There's a position stand on understanding a nutritional ingredient and a human metabolite known as beta hydroxy beta methylbutyrate, HMB. One on ketogenic diets and athletes. Another one on essential amino acids and athletes and performance. Another one on nutritional concerns of the female athlete, which is an underserved population. So I highly recommend that for anybody that works with female athletes and generally wants to have a better knowledge. One on coffee and sports performance, one on energy drinks and energy shots, one on,
Very interested in those two, especially at the high school level.
yeah, one also on tactical athlete nutrition, which is special forces and those kind of military
Of
nutrition,
course, of course.
and so forth. Sodium bicarbonate and exercise performance, probiotics, nutrition considerations for single stage ultra marathon and racing, general research and recommendations, things like this, nutrient timing, um, diets and body composition, creatine, protein, and many more. Uh, so I'm hoping that you're able to share that and people will jump over, take a look. They're free to download. They're open access articles. So, and they can be used easily for coaching and just general understanding. And anytime anybody has a question, I'm available to you.
This is fantastic information as I'm scrolling through it. So hopefully our producer and editors can link this link into our podcast so people can download. But I tell you what, I'll make this available to all my students because these are some, especially nowadays, high school level energy drinks. We're constantly talking about the pros and cons, cons of drinking those right before activity, and how dangerous inevitably it could be. But they've really got to read this and not hear it or be lectured on it or talked to. They need to discover this themselves, and sometimes reading a article like this might be the difference.
Exactly. Exactly. It might be something that spurs them for the next level. And athletes, you in high school, you have some athletes that just want to be part of a team. You have other athletes that they already envision themselves in NFL or wherever, right? Or in the Olympics for track and field. There's going to be a different level of engagement, but these kind of position papers and general knowledge about eating for health, eating for performance, sometimes that they conflict with each other. And then understanding where resources are, registered dietitians in the community, the International Society of Sport Nutrition. We can all be resources for coaches because it's all public domain and information's out there. So this is great being able to meet you, Joel, and to meet you, Eli, and you could thank Gabriel too. And
Definitely. I won't thank
hopefully
him
that
often. He is my brother, but I'll thank him this time for sure.
you could just tell him listen to that clip. That's enough.
Will do. Whenever we have a fun episode and a very knowledgeable guest, it just sprints by. And I'm amazed that we're already at that time. I thoroughly think, and I know, Joel, you're going to agree, we got to have you back because there are so many different avenues. I would love to go down with you, different rabbit holes to discuss. And we didn't even get to talk about the organization that you helped co-found. So I've got to have you back on another date, another episode.
And
Yeah.
thank you. I'd be happy to. And also, the ISSN, we published a couple of they're academic oriented, they're academic, but textbooks that are useful. They're sport nutrition textbooks. So they're useful for people like yourselves and other coaches and other health professionals that want a good background, evidence-based, and want like a shelf reference, if you will. So I'd be happy to come back. If somebody lets me, I'll try a single leg takedown. I was a wrestler. I don't know.
Uh, Joel has a little more experience. It's been a while since I took care of wrestling, so we'll let you take down him.
Lucky me.
No, we're all good. We don't want to take down. We want to build up.
Exactly.
We don't want somebody to say, "Oh man, my back."
Yeah,
That's
we
what
both,
you
we both say that lately, but unfortunately, yeah, me a little too often lately. Dr. Kalman, this has been fantastic. I feel like I'm cutting it short right now because there's so many more questions I have, and I know Joel and I are going back and forth, him too. But we will definitely circle back. Gabe, get on this one. Oh my God, we gotta have him back. I have so many rabbit holes I want to go down with him and make sure we educate our listeners. Dr. Kalman, thank you for finding the time because with your busy schedule, that's really what it is. Finding the time to be able to sit down. I guarantee within the next 24 hours, you're going to get another email from me going, when can we meet again? Because this has been, I've learned so much today in such a short amount of time. Yeah,
Thank you.
this is
Well, my
fantastic.
answer will still be sometime in 2026.
You got it. Yeah,
We're
you
almost
got
at
it.
the end of 2025. So I'd like to wish you and all the listeners and everybody else, of course, a healthy and happy holiday season and upcoming healthy and happy New Year to everybody. And
Good
most
luck on that
certainly,
15
we
pounds.
could schedule something for 2026.
You're on. And again, happy holidays. Hope you have a wonderful New Year and all the holidays that are among us right now. Be safe, be joyful. Hopefully, you and whatever family you have around you are safe and healthy and have a fantastic New Year.
All right. Thank you. Take care now.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one. Bye bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Want to make sure you hear every episode? Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to our podcast. Don't forget to share our podcast with your colleagues, family, and friends. Your support will help more people find and enjoy our content. Wrap It Up Sports Medicine and More is directed by Eli Hallak. It is produced by Gabriel Hallak. Our theme music is by Coma Studios via Pixabay. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the contributors. Want to know more about us? Visit us at wrapituppodcast.com. That's with 1P, wrapiduppodcast.com. Wrap It Up Sports Medicine and More is a production of Hallak Consulting, LLC.